All right, we're going to do this a little differently today. Sorry.
The word IoTA has two distinct meanings. As a noun, 1, a tiny or scarcely detectable amount. 2, the ninth letter of the Greek alphabet.
Welcome to IoTA for Friday, August 26th, 2016. I'm Tony Lynn. IoTA is a daily news podcast focused on the Internet of Things industry and hopefully anything about Atlanta I can get my hands on. So welcome to Friday. Happy Friday, casual Friday. All right, let's get right to it. Ken Brioda reports an IoT evolution that chronicled a San Francisco-based technology company has launched the Open Registry for IoT. Built on the Ethereum blockchain, the registry stores the identities of physical items for starters, consumer goods, and collectibles embedded with BLE and NFC microchips. In doing so, a secure, interoperable digital identity is established and new proximity-based consumer engagement opportunities become possible. Chronicle has open sourced the project under the Apache license. Pretty cool. So the obligatory quote, chip companies, physical IP creators, and brands can now register and verify their BLE and NFC chips on a public blockchain, said Ryan Orr, CEO of Chronicle. These tamper-proof chips can be ordered today and are already being deployed in consumer goods. He continues, one of the main problems holding back growth in the consumer IoT market is interoperability, says Daniel Cooley, SVP and General Manager of IoT Products of Silicon Labs. By putting IoT chip registrations into private databases, today every brand is creating the equivalent of its own private cellular phone network or its own private email system that is not interoperable with the network. This interoperable backend is a valuable building block and positive step for the entire IoT ecosystem, including app developers, brands, and consumers alike. So we've talked about Ethereum before with the blockchain and how they're going to bring this technology into IoT, and the fact that now there's becoming a little bit of an open registry for this. I think it's a good thing. Again, these things are just going to become more and more ubiquitous as we go forward. All right. Cyber experts are recommending network segmentation to facilitate IoT security, writes Alex Coma in State Scoop. I think State Scoop it's like a blog or sitting around working with states here in the U.S. At the National Association of State Technology Directors Annual Conference on Wednesday, public and private security leaders stressed the danger inherent in linking IoT devices to state networks, when many of these devices still aren't designed with security as a prime concern. Systems talking to parts of the network they shouldn't is probably the area of highest risk, says Stephen Hurst, Director of Security, Services, and Compliance for AT&T. But ironically, it's also one of the easiest ones to solve. Timothy Brown, Executive Director for Security with Dell, agrees that it's likely a question of microsegmentation and the creation of a managed gateways to control how IoT devices work with the rest of the network. It's more about the collection of data on the gateway, Brown said. If the temperature hasn't changed, why does the smart thermostat need to send it elsewhere? You can set it to report back every hour if you need it. Those types of things exist today. So I can't remember if we mentioned it here on the podcast or it was in a meetup I was in or whatever the case is. But one of the things that's been gaining ground here recently is this idea of network segmentation. And so just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we understand what that is that here in my office, I have a network that controls the podcast, it controls my Apple TV, it controls my Fire TV, it controls all these kind of things. But what they're saying is that for your smart devices to pull them off that network to create a different segmentation. Now you can either do this with IP, subnet mask, or you can actually create a separate Wi-Fi network itself in which to pull these things off and get them out of your systems. And in fact, if you really wanted to be secure, you would create a separate IP subnet as well as a separate Wi-Fi system as a whole. And even though they would be sharing the same gateway, at least they wouldn't be able to talk directly to the other devices within your house, or at least your computers and things along those lines. So I actually had this come up a few years ago when I was doing some changes to the pool, and they wanted to put it on a separate network. And at the time, I'm like, why? It doesn't make sense. I've got one. I don't need to manage more. But now in hindsight, it does. Shobit Seth reports that Investopedia that Intel and AT&T launch a platform for IoT based on the concept of software-defined network, an SDN, and network functions virtualization, NFV, too many TLAs. The new network for the digital age will employ low-cost hardware and be open to standard and open source technologies. A departure from existing network, which relies on high-cost, high-end dedicated hardware and proprietary software technology. This pragmatic shift will support flexibility, scalability, and automation. It will also improve the efficiency of emerging devices, including cloud computing, IoT, mobility, augmented and virtual reality, big data analytics, and high-resolution content over networks. AT&T will benefit by adopting Intel's technology and gaining access to upcoming products and services from a coveted group of public and private cloud providers called the Super Seven, which includes the likes of Alibaba, Amazon, Baidu, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Tencent. Excuse me. Defined by AT&T as a network built in software, SDN and NFV will allow AT&T to port existing hardware-dependent networking tasks to software running on standard processors. This initiative will substantially reduce the cost of network services as well as allow open source software to run on a standard low-cost hardware, leading to significant savings for service providers. AT&T aims to virtualize 30% of its network by the end of the year and hit the 75% mark by 2020. Hold on one second. All right, so what this means is that AT&T and Intel are banding together. This is probably more for Intel's benefit than AT&T's. AT&T is already somewhat of a leader in the IoT space. Intel's playing catch up to the likes of ARM, and now that ARM's been purchased by SoftBank, Intel's playing, from a second place position, which frankly they're not used to. So, combining their services with AT&T makes sense. The fact is, will it actually give us as consumers or us as developers, the gains that they're referring to? Only time will tell. All right, and I'm not going to go into too much of this one, but Lindsay O'Donnell reports 10 cool ways that companies are innovating in healthcare, and I didn't write down where it came from, but it's in the show notes. Some of this is a little bit fluffy. I'll talk about a couple of them that really kind of stood out to me. One was at AdhereTech, which actually makes smart pill bottles, so that the bottles themselves know when they were opened. They can judge how much was removed, and they can tell the time and the frequency in which that happens. And if it doesn't happen at the right frequency, it can notify the doctor that the patient's not taking their medicine as designed. That one's really cool. There's been a lot of technology kind of wrapped around making sure that pills or that medicine is taken appropriately. And this is probably the most interesting one I've seen in a while. Stanley Healthcare has the AeroScout real-time location system. It helps manage patients' staff equipment. We actually talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Qualcomm has a monitoring solution that does blood pressure, weight, and then collects biometric data via a tablet. Let me just scan through this real quick. There's GE Healthcare, Cisco, Microsoft, IBM. All these are using their base systems to actually get into the healthcare set. I'm not, again, there was nothing really there that seemed that innovative to me. Honeywell has something that they call the Honeywell Care Solution, which is a device that actually monitors blood pressure, glucose, and then ties it all in with a fitness tracker. But I'm not really sure how advanced any of this really is. I think Lindsay was just had a deadline and she was writing for her deadline. But anyway, we'll go from there. Last night I was at a Technology Association of Georgia event. It was the DevOps Society, and typically DevOps would be, well, DevOps. And but last night was a conversation about IoT. The actual name of the conversation last night was IoT and We. And there was a Dr. Folds from Georgia Tech actually did the statements, or the speech rather, and I found it fascinating. I was actually so enthralled and so pumped up afterwards that it was really cool. So my degree, even though I've always been a technologist, I actually have a degree in anthropology, and so his actual premise is the fact that all of technology, everything that we do, is wrapped around our desire to tell stories. It's the human in us that the only way we really know how to communicate is to tell each other stories. And how how detailed the stories are, how involved the stories are, either help us remember or not. And that IoT or technology in general is all about getting to tell the stories. And his biggest supposition is the fact that what the biggest transformer of technology that ever has been was the telephone. And the reason why is because that allowed point-to-point communication between a person and a person, and allowed for the actual message not to be translated or garbled in any way, whereas things that came before then would. And it also reduced the cost of getting such things. And that IoT, even though it's all about collecting data and just collecting as much data as we can to then make decisions, until we can turn that data into a story that is human recognizable, then IoT itself isn't not usable. And I just found that fascinating. That really, I had a ball. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have noticed, because I was tweeting it like every couple seconds. So anyway, it was a great meeting last night. I hope some of you were there and enjoyed it as much as I did. All right, that's it for Friday. Please send me feedback, story ideas to my email address at tunamuck@gmail.com. You can always find me on Twitter at tunamuck, or any of my projects at www.tunamuck.com. If you're enjoying the podcast, you're liking what you're seeing, you want me to get better, more professional, then please support us at the Patreon at patreon.com/tunamuck. And have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.